microphone.
Thank you. Okay, let's see, it's 6 o'clock on January 10th, 2024. This is a Shellfish Committee meeting, and I'll call the meeting to order. My first order of business is to read a notice of recording. Please note that tonight's meeting is recorded and broadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel, and in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, I must inquire whether anyone is taping this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. Other than the town, is anybody else taping this meeting? Thank you. First order of business, or next order of business, is to approve the meeting minutes from December 13th, 2023. I'll entertain a motion to approve them as presented. Candy.
I make a motion to approve them as presented.
Great. It's been moved. Do I hear a second? Second. Thank you. Discussion. Hearing no discussion. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Great. Any opposed? They have been approved. Thank you very much. I'll waive comments for this moment. No, actually, I do have a comment. We have a new liaison to the town council, Mr. Gordon Starr. He's now going to be the liaison. Welcome, Gordon. Natural Resources Report.
Okay, how's everyone? I don't have any maps to share this month because the next slate of openings we would have would be for February 15th, and we meet ahead of that. So, but next upcoming openings would be Mills River and Prince Cove. This is a reminder that we have the commercial shellfish permit lottery going on right now. People, if they're interested in getting into the lottery, need to submit their $5 and fill out their application prior to the end of the business day on January 31st. Because that is a weekday, we will be actually holding the lottery drawing on the 1st of February, and then that will set in chronological order the commercial lottery for the year. So if we have any non-renewals, and we know we already have one, Russell White decided not to renew this year, then that permit will get offered to the first person on the list. We also have January permit sales to date. We don't have a comparison until next month because, what was it you said, Alicia?
Last year was when we had just switched over to the January renewal, so we didn't do it January of last year.
Last year was when we switched over to the January renewal and had the prorate for people who wanted to renew early. So at this point, as of today, we have sold 350 resident permits, 123 non-resident permits, 265 resident senior permits, 10 non-resident veteran permits, 37 non-resident veteran senior permits, for a total of 185 permits, totaling an income of $40,680.
Cool.
We have performance standards for mooring area classification and status. For anybody who shellfishes and has been annoyed with mooring area closures, we're getting a little bit of guidance now from Division of Marine Fisheries of what they would consider acceptable for changing that closed as a conditionally approved area status within a mooring field to open during the boating season, if you can fall into these types of categories. So in a place like Hyannis, where we know we have a lot of large boats that are capable of overnight occupancy and already have water quality closures that take place in the summertime, I'm not really messing with that. Similarly, the Catuit Town dock mooring area is humongous, and there are a lot of boats in there that are capable of overnight occupancy. So I see that as a heavy lift at this point, not knowing what FDA will accept or not accept. However, Catuit Oyster Company mooring area and the Bridge Street mooring area, I think definitely have a number of boats that are suitable to show that they're not capable of overnight occupancy, that they don't have marine sanitation devices on them, and if we can not overburden the harbor master with providing pump out logs, we can probably work on this year getting those areas to be open when they would normally be closed, from the period of time in which we have 20 boats in there to the period of time in which we have 19 boats in there. So that's kind of exciting. The self-verification notification that I spoke of last month for growers that are interested in utilizing floating pens, cages, whatever, 1 per acre, 2 acre parcel, or a licensed parcel, depending on size, in Barnstable Harbor. Tried to fill out the application. It is not, in fact, a fillable form. I've reached out to Army Corps, and they're working on it with their IT department. Essentially, the self-verification notification, should you decide to fill it out and submit it, you can start using those pens or cages immediately after. But if they then decide that you have to meet some other requirements, then you would have to stop. So I would probably hold off until they get those drop-down menus fixed and interactive, prior to putting anything out on your site. Like, get the for real permission to do so first. And then we have the Barnstable Harbor conditionally approved water quality year 2 sampling has come to an end, and the results are interesting. We have the marsh stations continue to test like there's waterfowl present and like they make fecal movements. But the areas that were of most interest, especially to the commercial fishery from about like Greenpoint out towards like the exit to the Cape Cod Bay, looking very promising. And with a 3rd year, this upcoming year of samples, if they are also good to go, then we can likely work with DMF to reassess those areas and redefine them, effectively removing the conditionally approved status so they would be open between September 15 and December 15. So
Cool.
That's nice. And honestly, even though the rest of the stations that we kind of thought might be okay, might not be okay, I think it's good that they chose to do all of them, because it gives you a baseline now on what it looks like fecally each year versus the 90s when it was done last. Monthly propagation report. This is supplied by Devin Harrington. Sorry. Ooh, yeah. By Devin Nunez, who just got offered a job as the Eastham Shellfish Constable and will be leaving. So just as you got to know her, she's walking out the door. But congratulations to her.
Where's she going?
To Eastham. They've been constable-less since about July of last year, I want to
Gotcha.
say. So she had expressed interest in her interviews that she wants to be a shellfish constable, so good for her. So we'll have a vacancy there at some point in time. So in the meantime, she gave us our propagation report, still currently maintaining 246 predator exclusion nets. North and south side nets were free of morcodium and other seaweed before cleaning nets compared to November. They put in their last order for 2024 with ARC because they won the county bid. Pathology report came back from the county after checking on the status of dermo in 3 bays using a sample of oysters from Katuitt Town Dock. Prevalence was 46.7%, weighted prevalence 0.67, intensity 1.43. So we are still in a light to moderate infection, but everybody knows dermo is in 3 bays. It's just managing it. We're looking at, because it's so all over the place, limiting the number of oysters that we do on the south side, or adopting different harvest limits for such that will probably be more palatable to the recreational fishery. But we just want, the second the stuff hits legal size, we want it to go. We don't want it sticking around. On the south side, continuing to finish planting the remainder oyster bags from the propagation area in Katuitt Bay, and those are being planted at Bridge Street. So we still have a lot of oysters at Bridge Street. North side, Scudder is getting a little bit picked over because it's the most popular place for people to go, and because they have effectively cleaned out Bay Street, and so nobody really caught on to the Bridge Street thing. But we planted over 300,000 oysters there, so there's still plenty of oysters there. They've been checking on the quahogs being overwintered at Hooper's Island, Flipsy, and they are still alive. All unused gear in the propagation area at Scudder has been removed.
I have a question. The oysters from the Katuah Town dock, were they just like ones that were just like picked up there? Or did you guys, for the dermo pathology tests? Like,
It's stuff that was in our propagation area. We have a small grow-out operation
I
off of the
gotcha.
Katuah Town dock, and some of the stock is from local growers, and then some of the stock is from the Upweller in
like a rec area to go
Bismarck.
pick, like oysters off the ground or?
No, like they're being grown out in trays, and then when
Oh,
they're
okay.
ready to be relayed to an area
Right,
for
there's
people
one
to
there.
harvest them, they go to Bridge Street.
I
We
gotcha.
were planting on bottom in Katuah for maybe 3 or 4 years, but the algae on the bottom there has become a problem and was suffocating everything that we put on bottom
Where is
and
it, just
killing
on
it.
on that point, right over like to the east of the Katuah Town dock?
It is to the not directionally savvy, so it's to the, if you're facing the water, to the left of the dock.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And here we have updated harvest information, effective through the end of the year, showing all of our harvests of oysters and quahogs from different areas as reported through our weekly checks of recreational harvesters. And if nobody has any questions about that,
Al, move away from the microphone, scratching the microphone.
then that would be
Any
what I have
questions?
for updates for natural resources for the month.
Committee, you have any questions for Amy? Public? No? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Before we hop into new business, I'm going to go over to the renewal and transfer hearing. Rob Ashworth, that's already been heard, right?
No, it's tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, 111. Can you tell us about Rob's? And is Mr. Cosgrove here for Rob today?
No, because
Oh,
Rob
okay.
doesn't have any floating gear in his backyard. front
Gotcha.
yard. For that, whatever. So this is a site that has been licensed to Rob since the 90s. The license number 94-149 is that it was, licensed in 1994 and was the 149th site. So there are approximately shy of an acre. We have a mean low water depth of 1 foot, mean high water depth of 7 feet with the existing bottom conditions of sand. There are no natural shellfish present, which is why that is crossed out. And he cultivates oysters and quahogs there. Oysters are contained in bags, placed on racks off bottom. Quahogs will be seated in substrate under netting. So he harvests, I can't read that, but basically
Calling
it's,
on grant.
oh, calling on grant, yeah. So that's, if you've ever seen Craigwick come out there, that's what he's doing. And then quahogs is via long rake. He does institute a predator control plan over his quahogs. This is his sole means of support. He does employ outside help and is requesting a renewal for 10 years. He's remained on this site as newly issued since 1994 and continues to use it in the same manner. This is his site in West Bay that's kind of close to
This West
our,
Bay?
yeah, off of off of Oyster Harbors where we also have our
Yeah.
propagation area, yeah. And that's it. It will be heard tomorrow along with Virginia's renewal, which you guys heard last
Right.
month.
Okay. Is he up to date with all of his compliance?
He is, yeah, yep.
And does Natural Resources have any issue with a renewal such as this?
We do not.
Okay. Questions? Committee?
Make a motion to,
Hold on, just anybody from the public want to speak on this application, renewal application? No? I'll entertain a motion.
make a motion to approve the application,
So we would recommend,
recommend approval of the application in West Bay for Rob Ashworth.
great. It's been moved, do I have a second? Great. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of Approving this motion as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. The coastal project for Barberry,
Yes,
104 Great Bay Road.
yeah.
What do we got here?
Well, it went before the commission last night. It is a proposal for a over 100-foot dock. It's the only property on this road that doesn't have a dock, so obviously we need one. And it's proposed for being a seasonal dock with ramp and float for non-motorized vessel, because even at 131 feet in length, they're only going to tap into 2.5 feet of water. The intent, as I watched the hearing today, was that the property owner was looking to have a dinghy and small sailboat there, and is under the assumption that he's going to get a boat and also a mooring in North Bay, although all of those lists are closed. So the commission had lengthy discussion around some of the sort of disappointment from not only Division of Marine Fisheries, but also from our department. Obviously, we're not supportive of something like that in an area that has good habitat, has cohogs, has soft shells, and is rated a 10. But ultimately, through discussion, they determined that legally they wouldn't have any standing should it be challenged, because it fits within their current dock and pier regulations that were, promulgated in 2004 to 2006. And so got them to cut the length of it by 20 feet, to put float stops at 1 foot, and to shrink the size of the float to 8 by 16, and it was approved.
Surprise, surprise.
We don't have to.
Amy, I have a
Oh,
question.
so it was approved, so
It's
it's
a
going through.
seasonal dock, what does that mean?
It means that it comes in and out every year.
So they take the whole 131 feet out, or just
Not
the
all
float?
131 feet of it
The whole thing.
necessarily,
The whole
but
thing?
essentially,
Well,
yeah.
except for the,
Yeah, pretty
maybe the
much the
first
whole
15
Right,
or 20
it's pretty
feet.
much the whole fee, yeah, pretty much the whole
Maybe
thing.
like
It's in the water,
first
comes out.
Yeah,
That's amazing, that's expensive.
So I have a question.
yep.
On the agenda, it says that proposed project is to
Oh, yes.
repair or replace existing timber bulkhead.
I do have on here that there was an agenda error that apparently was mine that I didn't notice until today. But in the project application, it does, at least I hope it does, otherwise.
The
they
address the
submitted.
same?
To permit a proposed seasonal pier ramp and float for non-motorized use. Yes, yeah,
104 Great Bay?
yeah.
And it's already been approved by Conservation.
Yeah, it was heard by Conservation last night, and so, even though they had some, close to an hour-long discussion around it, it was approved. I think the only reason it was continued was because they didn't have the DEP SE number assigned yet, but once they have that assigned, it'll be, 2 seconds on a future agenda.
Great. Any discussion from the committee on this? Public? Okay, great. I'm going to go back to proposed aquaculture regulation changes. Everybody have copies of these? We talked about these last meeting. Amy's done work on these, and I'll take them one at a time. Number one is 40750. Amend the existing regulation by removing the crossed-out word and adding the highlighted in bold word. Is it up there behind me?
It is, I don't know, what is the preference of the committee? Do you want to have it with the changes highlighted in this way? Or do you want to have it up on screen with how it would read as a whole with the changes implemented?
My preference would be to be able to see the changes.
Yeah.
Okay with the committee? Okay. So the first one, 40750, filing and posting of applicants. So you're changing division to department?
Yep, and then we were removing the fact that Town Hall would be responsible for keeping the list, because now all applicants go through our office and the list is maintained in our online tool. I did have, following the most recent meeting, somebody reach out to me and ask for a copy of that list. And so it was provided, so that's an easy way to get it if you're curious, like who's on the list and where they fall on the list. We can produce that for you.
Great. Any discussion about this change? Public? No. Can we vote on these individually? Great. So I'll entertain a motion to approve this as revised or amended. So somebody want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we accept 407-50 as amended in the proposal.
That's great. It's been moved, seconded. Have a second. Further discussion? Committee, public? All those in favor of the motion that's presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, approved. Number 2, amend the existing regulation by adding the wording highlighted in bold. Can you just talk us through this, please, Amy?
Sure. So this was to address untimely deaths as we had discussed last month, and the wording is more in line with state statute. It gives licensees a license to continue on through family members or somebody listed in a will for a period of time. So that way, if somebody, unexpectedly passes or if something happens, that it won't automatically get reverted to the town. It's more in line with the state statute. You guys were in favor of everything except for the superfluous wording that I had adopted from the MGL itself, which I have removed.
Okay. Discussion?
I have a quick question. It said the applicant should be treated as a new application. What would change for them? So if it's like an ongoing business and it's left to someone, when that.
Oh, because it's seen as a transfer, and any transfer is seen as a new application.
So they go back to, they have to take the class and they have to have, it's 5 years instead of 10.
Basically, I'm pretty sure it'd just be 5 years until their first renewal.
Unless there are,
And then every 10 years. It
so
said
that's
probably
where
the-
this new regulation for the educational requirement comes in. So it's within the first 2 years, we're requiring somebody to take that course if they're a new licensee or some other equivalent. So let's say if somebody passes and their son or daughter is inheriting it and has worked on the site for the past decade, probably going to waive that requirement, but it would still be treated as a new license. And so they would have to have it for 5 years before being able to transfer.
Got it, thank you.
Further discussion? Yeah, go ahead. Did you-
Does that also include, if it's like a new application, you're on an initial 5-year lease, and then you can apply for the 10-year lease after that 5's up, if you tend to hold.
Yep, yeah,
take
it
over?
follows all of the same rules as any other aquaculture.
Yeah, it's like a transfer.
Yeah,
From that point.
it's essentially just a safety for unforeseen events. That doesn't mean that your entire business gets taken out from underneath you because of a circumstance that's out of your control.
If you don't have a will, right? Because like a will could override that, or
If you have a will and you want to transfer
Yeah,
to somebody
yeah.
and that's written in, say for instance, Scott Korkich has provided me in writing with his intentions for his site should he pass or something happen to him.
Yeah.
And so we would honor that. That person would still, throughout that period of time, not to exceed, I think, what we say, 5 years?
5 years.
Would have to prove that they fall within our existing regulations for domicile, but that's only a year's proof that you've lived here. So if somebody wants to take over the farm, is in the family, is, like a spouse or son, daughter, all of the things that are listed there, then it gives them an opportunity to come settle here and meet that requirement while also having a handful of years to figure out if this is something they actually want to do. And if not, at the end of 5 years, they can transfer or revert it to the town.
So it would be like 5 years in that scenario, and then 5 years as a new applicant.
No, it's all the same 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
Runs concurrently, it sounds like.
yes.
Okay. Further discussion within the committee? Public? Yes, Mark. Please introduce yourself, step to the table, and that way we can use the microphone. Thanks.
Forgot about that, thank you. Yes, Mark Begley. I am a grower in Barnstable Harbor of oysters, been doing it since 1999. I guess my question to Amy is, had you considered not requiring that limitation on transfer in this situation. In other words, within that first 5 years, to not allow a transfer from someone, say their spouse received the untimely death, and then the person doesn't want to operate it, shouldn't they be allowed to transfer it at some point rather than not being able to, and they have to continue to use it for 5 years before they're allowed to transfer it to someone else?
I think that kind of opens up then the discussion that if that unforeseen event happens and nobody in the family wants to take it over, then if they didn't expressly state that they want it to go to somebody else, or like if that person, if they didn't have that person in place, wouldn't that be an instance where it should be reverted to the town?
It depends on the specifics of it, I think, but
I guess the one like exception that I could see to that would be with Chris Freeman.
yeah.
And his mother, after speaking to him after he passed, they had no interest in it within the family. But had Chris had a will at the time, he probably would have left it to Cliff,
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess like the wording in this situation doesn't address that.
Yeah, because in some cases, it is a business, maybe just an individual sole proprietorship, but
Yeah.
it's a business that is, completely going away if it's going back to the town in that case.
Understood.
But you could always just write in somebody other than your family member to take it over.
Well, they're saying like, what if there isn't a will expressly leaving it to somebody who is not the family?
Yeah.
And then like none of the family actually wants to take it over. Can they have the option to transfer to that person who has the interest but wasn't named in less than 5 years is the question.
And sometimes you also, I've seen over the years out there, people think they want to do it until they actually start doing it. And then
Right.
they find out how much work it is. And then it's, within a year, they're sure that they don't want to work it another 4 years or something.
Yeah, because in that case, it would be 5 years until that a grant is empty,
Yeah.
Potentially, you're right.
Yeah. And not being used.
So then,
So here's my suggestion.
this needs work then again.
Yep. Can the growers put together something in response to this, share it with Amy so that we then can discuss it further at our next meeting? Rather than trying to,
Yep.
get into the minutia right now.
And again, I knew that this was going to be discussed tonight. I didn't think of it until the meeting, when it was
Okay.
being discussed. Otherwise, I would have reached out to you earlier, so.
It's not a problem. I love rewriting.
Anybody else? So I'm going to put this on for next agenda.
Awesome.
Number 3, 40757, amend the existing regulation by removing the crossed-out wording highlighted in bold and adding the wording highlighted in bold.
Okay, so after last month's meeting, it seemed like everybody was relatively comfortable with 4 acres being a modest acreage limitation increase. Concern was around potential cap. I tried to take a stab at that would meet the intent of the idea originally. And also, now that we're allowing people the potential to put their name and their business on the license itself, to put a cap on like that business name being present on more than 8 acres of license. So essentially, what it would read in its entirety is that the maximum total acreage licensed to any new licensee shall not exceed 4 acres. A new licensee may apply for additional acreage if applicable only after the expiration of the original 5-year license. The maximum total acreage licensed to any existing licensee shall not exceed 4 acres on the north side and 4 acres on the south side within the town of Barnstable Inner Bays. If a business name is present on an aquaculture license along with the name of the individual licensees, the business may not have an interest in more than 8 acres on the north side and 8 acres on the south side within the town of Barnstable Inner Bays. These acreage limitations do not apply to any existing grant, now referred to as license, which is in excess of 4 acres, and will not prevent the grant holder, now referred to as the licensee, from future renewals or transfers, provided that said licensee abides by all other applicable regulations set forth herewith. All previously permitted north side and south side Inner Bay license sites will remain as such and cannot be combined into larger permitted sites under one license. So essentially, all of the larger parcels that were grandfathered in will remain as such and can be transferred as such. All of the other parcels that are smaller, which are largely on the north side, there are some smaller ones on the south side, but they'll retain the size that they were permitted as and cannot be combined into one license. So I know that was a concern that like the individual licensed parcels would stay individual. But this is an attempt at consolidating through a year of discussion what people were looking to consolidate, allowing the business name to be present in such a way that like our department is comfortable with signing off on, and allow for a modest acreage limitation increase. This was one that we all agreed needed a lot of wordsmithing, and this was the best attempt that I could come up with in the past month.
Well, this is probably the most contentious part of the whole thing. And I would have to say that I think this is a very good start. I commend you for putting this together because I think it is a start. And I think it's,
I'll acknowledge that I don't know where like the issuing licenses directly to corporations goes in the
No, but I think
future.
it's,
But I
it's a
know that
start.
we've reached like a standstill at this
Yeah.
point, and this is an area, I think, of justifiable compromise.
Absolutely.
So that's.
So I'm going
that's
to put
what I
this on the
have for
next
you.
agenda in between now and then. Can the growers come up with some proposed language?
What?
To
I
this.
think this is okay the way it is, isn't it?
Go ahead.
So, I mean, I know some of the concerns of some people is, how do you check like that? I think the wording as the regulation is right there. I mean, as far as like, is there something we can add like to the requirements, the proof of domicile? Is there something that each individual licensee has to prove each year? Because the only concern I think of some people is the fact that I could start a new business tomorrow, which reasonably so, like we're all heading towards this way, but we just want to make sure there's no loopholes for the outside. If you were to leave the regulation, is it easier to leave that regulation wording as is and then add like a requirement? Like,
It
I'm not
already
sure
is.
which way
It already is a requirement.
as far as,
No,
I'm-
as far as the business is concerned.
I'm just saying, as far as showing, hey, I'm the owner. Like,
Who can, like you couldn't start just 2 businesses with 8 acres, is what you're saying?
well,
It's an
say,
existing licensee.
yes, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, how you could start another business. It's to check, make sure to tie the name with the business. I think,
But that's what it's saying.
It's saying that the name of the individual licensee has to be there, but I think what you're saying is that the individual licensee takes precedent over the business. So it's not the business that holds the license, it's the licensee, it's the individual, and the business is just there almost like a note.
yes, but do you understand what I'm kind of saying?
I don't, I'm sorry.
All right.
I think I kind of understand, and I'll just say something. There is a rumor out there that Pangea, who has acreage out there, I don't know if it's true or not, like they run through some other people.
Yeah.
So we
People
have.
want to try to, if that's true, like I said, a rumor, if that's true, Pangea obviously is in Barnstable.
We have a
There's a
regulation in place that allows any licensee to
think
contract
that's-
with whoever they want to, but the license is held by the licensee. Similarly, Rob Ashworth lives in town, Craig Whitcomb does not. Craig operates as a contractor on Rob Ashworth's site. What is the difference?
Okay, that's what,
You know what I
I'm
mean?
just, that's what I'm saying, that's what I'm thinking, he's kinda
Yeah.
somewhat getting at, which, if it's true, I mean, obviously.
They don't hold a license in this town,
Yeah.
no.
Like why?
Pangea
why
doesn't, or
limit
Whitcomb
it?
doesn't, you're saying.
Whitcomb does not hold a license in this town. He operates as a contractor on Rob Ashworth's site.
Right.
Dave Cranshaw does not hold a license in this town, but is the farm manager for both Phil Boudreau and Dennis Connery. So there are plenty of instances, well, Corey lives in town, but he was operating on another person's site as a contractor for a number of years before getting a transfer. So we don't have in place a requirement for who people contract with to also be domiciled, if that's what you're getting at.
Not really.
Yeah.
But I'll think of a way
David,
to bring it up.
hold on. I've just recognized David Ryan.
David Ryan. I live in Katuitt. And I think as long as we have the name on the license with the required domiciled procedures in place, then I think
Yeah.
I think it covers it.
I think.
Thank you.
I'm like the limit on the 8 acres. It's like almost like just kind of like just going to be just another loophole that it is now. Where why wouldn't you just start another company and have 8 other acres that you run? Now you run 16 acres. I mean, it's the same thing as what's going on now.
But you still need the individuals tied to those sites.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm trying to say is, what is the 8 acre if? So yeah, so then there is still a loophole. So why even put the 8 acres in there? What's it preventing? Do
It's
you get what
just
I'm saying?
preventing one business entity from having an interest in more than 8 acres on the north side and 8 acres on the south side, with the exception of any other
But who's gonna
business
stop
entities
you
that
if
were
you have 8
previously
acres
permitted.
and now you want to get 2 or 4 more, that you just don't have somebody put it in their own name and their own business name?
That's literally what already exists
Exactly.
now. You
That's
can't.
that's what I'm saying. It's like
I think
so,
part
so
of
I
the
guess what
problem
I'm
is
saying
that that
what does-
loophole is not fixable.
So what does the 8 acre limit like do? I guess.
It just puts a limitation up front to anybody that's doing
But
legitimate
it doesn't.
business.
It doesn't really seem to do anything. Is I guess what I'm saying.
I understand. Please introduce yourself.
I guess Jen Bunnell. I think Amy was very poignantly getting at the fact that, you know, if you had 3 kids and a wife and you wanted 10 acres and you could find someone to transfer 2 acres to each person, that's 100% can happen.
Mm-hmm.
The 8 acres, I think for the business side of things, I think it would be so nice to have, once we get down the line and we start to do like reporting and all that stuff, to have everything be able to just be on one thing for one business. I don't think you're going to find people are starting a whole new business and finding 4 people to transfer their grants to them. They got to find the individuals, 1, and 2, they'd have to legitimately start a whole other business, which is not. I don't know. I don't see that really happening.
Just start an LLC. I'm just as far as the reporting goes. When you guys report, do you have 4 Safest accounts or just 1?
We have 1, so everybody has.
So you have all. So when
Yeah.
specifically, what is the reporting?
So for the state, there's obviously 4 different propagation permits
But it
for
all
me
goes under
individually.
one.
No.
No, when you report like your.
Oh, for Safest,
Yeah.
for state reporting,
For
100%.
Yeah.
But everybody, you know, obviously you have the main permit number and then everybody has their individual transaction card. I'm talking about town reporting because for right now, if you have 4 different grants, you're filling out 4 different things and kind of saying these operate as one farm. I think that's.
Yeah, but it's like the same thing as filling out multiple mooring permits, is it not every year? And it's like, it's just one thing that you fill out once a year.
Okay, so think about it this way. So operating my 8 acres. When I report at the end of the year,
I know what you guys have to do. You have to divide up.
you have to divide, you have to
Yeah,
take
but
a
that's not-
percentage and say, okay, so I moved 25% on each grant or whatever, and I bought
But that's
seed
how,
for,
it's
and
that,
that's,
it's that hard to do that once a year on a one, it's
it's not actually true, because I don't really know, because I'm growing stuff on.
More true.
I think, I understand what you're saying. I think it would be, down the line, for me, it would be wonderful to have one report, and it would represent 4 different license sites.
I get it.
In the
So,
town.
but it just seems like,
You're stuck on the 8 acres in a business?
I'm just saying, what is the, why even have 8 acres? Why have a limit?
Because you guys were all afraid Bumblebee Tuna was
He
going to
wants
come
to
in.
have-
Well, I'm just saying, because there's people that want there to be some kind of limiting factor. And so, and Amy agrees that it shouldn't be 1 million acres, but what does the 8 acres on this protect? Well, I just don't see how you wouldn't just be able to do exactly what you're doing with the 4 reports for 4 farms.
Well, forget the
And then do
reports.
it-
The reports are kind of an irrelevant part
Exactly,
of
yeah.
this thing.
But I'm
But
just
they
saying.
keep coming up.
Yeah.
They keep coming up, but it's not a good, it's about the family farm. It's about, Jen has a farm, she's got her husband, herself, her son, who's
15, and my
15,
father-in-law, who's
and the
77.
father-in-law. In other words, they have a family farm. All the town is trying to do is make it a family farm. Instead of
Yeah.
this over here, this over there, this over here. It's a family farm. That's what it is. And it's a small family farm. And all the town is trying to do is sort of get it to a point where, hey, I can have a family farm. My wife can have 4 acres, and I can have 4 acres, and we can have 8 acres. And that's a pretty nice farm.
So let me just correct what you just said.
Yeah.
You have a business and you have 8 acres, and you have a family farm over here. And that business is ABC business, and the family farm over here has the 8 acres. Now you're controlling 16 acres.
No, because what this is saying is, Jen, for instance, she can have 4 acres.
Maximum for an
2
individual.
sites, okay?
I don't read that at all here.
You don't?
No.
So if I
It
got-
says,
I know what it says, Al, and I appreciate that. But I could drive a Mack truck
an
through the holes
existing
here.
licensee shall not exceed 4 acres.
And define licensee. Is it a
Licensee is
person
the manager, or whatever they call it.
or is it an LLC? That you can start a business with a couple of clicks with the Secretary of State, and voila, you have a new business. And that new business can have 8 acres.
But the aquaculture license that's issued, even if it has the business name present on the license, is issued to the individual. I
Does it
showed
say
you
that here?
guys- I showed you guys last month, it says in a different regulation that they're only issued to individuals. And then they're referred to as a licensee. So I didn't think that it needed to have the word individual in this regulation, because no corporation is able to apply for an aquaculture license. It has to be an individual.
So do you hear that? That's different than what the growers are looking for. What I think the growers are looking for is that the license issued to them is issued in the name of their LLC or their business. So then all of a sudden you have something to pass on. That's your exit strategy or your succession plan. ABC Business controls X number of acres, and you sell that
You would
business
only-
and you transfer the acreage pursuant to the transfer rules. So I have a problem with it still.
I think the big key here is just understanding the definition of the individual and the business. The only aspect where the business is even tied to is the 8 acres. The individual, there's still a name to each individual 2-acre grant, but each individual can have up to 4 acres, and the business is part of the license, but there's still a name on it. The business aspect is only for the 8-acre limitation. It's like,
But it doesn't say that, DJ.
yeah.
And if you have to interpret it, then, again, you can drive a truck through it, as far as I'm concerned.
It also says the business may not have interest in more than 8 acres instead of the individual may not have.
Well,
Because the
it'd be
individual
two,
can't have an interest in more than 4 acres.
it'd have to be 2 individuals.
But referring to the business gives the business,
Right, so say, let's use
Agency.
Jen and Matt as an example. Let's say this regulation goes into effect, right? And Jen, Jack's gone 5 years, transfers his site to you. So you now hold 2 licenses, each of them totaling not more than 4 acres. And your father, Matt's father, transfers to Steve. So Steve now has 2 sites, not to
For Matt.
total more than 4 acres. If you choose to put on your aquaculture license, Jen Bunnell, comma, manager, comma, Sandy Neck Oyster, on your 2 licenses for your 4 acres, and if Matt Bunnell decides to put Matt Bunnell, comma, co-manager, whatever, Sandy Neck Oyster on his 4 acres, then Sandy Neck Oyster is now tied to 8 acres on aquaculture licenses. And so you could have another individual that decides he wants to come to work for you, but that 2 acres cannot have the name Sandy Neck Oyster attached to it, is what the intent is here.
And that will
Is
prevent-
meeting halfway between
Yeah.
not directly issuing a license to a corporation while still allowing some consolidation of what's already out there, and putting limitations on it.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I understand if that's not what that says. Obviously, until everybody was on the same page with something like this, it has not gone to legal for vetting verbiage yet. Because I'm not going to waste their time with wording if it's just going to be like, well, this needs to be amended and that needs to be amended and this needs to be fixed. So it needs to kind of all be on the same page wording wise before I send it to them for
how do you
butchering.
come up with the wording for something like that though? Because isn't it more of what our intent is and then let them come up with the legalese to?
Yeah, but we
that
all have to
intent?
agree what the intent is, so I can adequately explain it to them when they ask me questions about it. So like without something like this in place, I can't even go to them because we're not all in cohesion with what the intent is until that point.
Okay.
So at least this would give me something to start with and an explanation for when they have questions such as that. And then they can provide me with wording that makes it more happy for a lawyer to read, as I
hear you.
am not a lawyer.
Yeah, yeah. What happened, Ms. Bunnell, with the proposal that you put together? Did that end up with Amy or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It wasn't really a proposal in terms of like actual wording changes for regulations, more of like a bulleted list of what their concerns and issues with. And then I figured out which regulations those apply to and tried to apply them to the best of my ability in combination with what I know my department would be okay standing behind.
Can I ask the growers to put together their language to 40757? Which is what we're talking about right now.
I like the language the way it is.
I think, I mean, there's a few of us who have seen it. I mean, obviously, there's a whole bunch of growers that aren't here, and I don't want to speak for anybody that's obviously not here, but Paul, Mark, Dave, Al. I mean, I think it needs a little bit of tweaking, but personally, I like the wording.
Like I said, I personally agree with that too. I just think, if there is a concern about vagueness, I feel like it's not something you could add to the wording of the regulation. I think it just can be something outside of
Well,
it.
maybe we can come up with a bulleted list of what we're concerned about in just plain English so that it can then maybe get incorporated.
I like it.
What's your concern?
It's my concern?
Yeah.
I'm a little confused right now. It's my concern. My concern, I think, is the business piece of it. I'm not 100% sure I understand exactly what the intent is of this particular,
The intent?
Yep.
The intent is to make it 8 acres for a family of 2, or 4, yeah.
4
One.
acre increments to be capped at 8.
We're the only thing that's happening here is we're doubling the acreage that you're allowed to have.
But there's also a change to how this would be named.
The only reason that I put that wording in was because last month concerns over a cap being present in the regulation were brought up. I mean, I can just as easily go and get rid of that sentence if everybody is in agreement that the loopholes, no matter what the wording is, will still exist in 2 acres, will still exist in 4 acres. So, I mean, if that's like, if the contention is over a sentence that I came up with in an attempt to put a cap on it based on our conversations last month, then I can remove that sentence that speaks to the business interest and just keeps it, any individual can have 4 acres. And those individuals, per our agreement, can opt to have the business name on their license along with their individual name and their domicile.
So why not simply allow the licensee, who is an individual who's domiciled in this town, why not allow them to have the acreage? And for reporting purposes, they can combine all of the acreage that they appear to control.
I have that as a suggestion under matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair, because I would like to revisit the minimum production regulation. I think it is more appropriate based on how operations are from farm to farm in town for it to be a minimum investment value annually. And then I don't think the Shellfish Committee itself needs to take a part necessarily in what the annual reports look like, because the only piece of a regulation that speaks to annual reports is that you have to do them and that we provide you forms to do them on. And so what the form looks like is 100% up for discussion. And I think over the course of like some meetings with growers, we can get at like, here's an annual report for people who operate on 2 acres. Here's an annual report for people who operate on 4 acres. Here's an annual report for people who operate on 8, and here's an annual report for people who operate on grandfathered parcels of much more than 10, and have those be line items that fit within the reasonable investment value per site. Because really, the intent of annual reporting is to show the town that these sites that are being privately leased on public land, right, for private use and benefit, are actually being utilized.
Right.
But people who operate more than one site may be using one site strictly as a nursery. And so $4,000 per acre per year of marketable product as currently defined doesn't necessarily make sense. But it doesn't take you very long to get to $4,000 worth of seed that you have under some nets or in some bags. And so can that be a minimum investment value rather than production value? And then that would lend much more towards a sort of reinvented annual report. And yeah, I don't see any reason why, if you have a number of sites that fall under a farm, then putting all of those on one sheet of paper, so long as it's line itemed in such a way that it shows that you're meeting that minimum investment currently called production value, then everybody's happy.
I like the direction that that's going,
Yeah.
because it solves a problem that this doesn't,
Right.
and the problem that you talked about. And the reporting is an issue, and it shouldn't be an issue.
No, shouldn't be this
Yeah,
hard.
but it's not,
No.
it's not the issue.
No, I certainly get that that's not the issue, but it is,
It's a piece.
it's a piece of it, right? Okay, work in progress.
I would like to vote on it.
I appreciate that.
I'd like to make a motion that we vote on it,
I won't entertain it,
okay? Why not?
because I don't think it's ready.
Well, she said it's still gonna, it's got another step to go anyway,
Right.
so.
So it's not ready.
Well, it's not gonna be ready when we vote on it again.
That is a bad attitude, Al.
I think it's the 4
The
acres.
attorneys anyway.
What's that?
I think it's the 4 acres. You could keep that as 2, and I'd vote on it. But the 4 is where it's just basically the same thing we're doing, just 4 acres instead of 2. Is how I feel about it.
Yep.
So my operation, for example, I've been doing this 7 years. I finally went over a hump of farming oysters. I've been farming for like 15 years now, but I'm also at the point where, you know, I am completely out of room. And I'm out there every day, and I do have the ability to use up more area for my operation, even by myself. So I think the 4 acres, you know, would be a key. I mean, I know Dave's been saying for years, hey, 2 isn't enough, right? I think in that aspect, like, I mean, I need it. It's because you can't. One thing I realized, and I mean, it took me 5 years until I bought enough seed. You don't make money on 2 acres, especially when you have 10 feet of ice come through and pull up 75% of your farm, you know? And each area is unique. I mean, I can only do oysters on the front end of my grant. I mean, I could do it back, but you're also talking about the most dry time out of all the grants out there where we are. So that, like, as far as that situation, and I understand your worries, but also understand who's out there right now. And I think that's also something that this committee should be able to police more. So if this regulation were to go through, you know, we got to check each other as far as when the renewal of licenses go, you know? But I think as far as a step in the right direction, I mean, I think that 4 acres would be huge for a lot of people. That's just my tidbit. So,
And the way that you acquire 2 more acres would be a transfer.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
so I mean, it's cleaning up kind of what already goes on out there. I mean, there's a whole lot of names out there that I've never met before that are on the licenses, and there's a reason for that. And I'd rather see the grant or an extra grant go on someone who's out there.
Sure.
Their name, you know? Let them have the choice on that grant. I think that's moving to the right direction as far as just, it's pretty much just a cleanup, you know? There's too many names, I think, just to begin with.
Do we have any grants that aren't assigned?
One, right?
Yeah, there's one.
So how would people go from, 2 to 4?
It's a transfer, is what I,
Say that again?
So if everything we have is already assigned, how would someone go from a 2-acre grant to a 4-acre
You
grant?
buy one.
So you have to find somebody who's leaving.
No, you have to say that. There is no leaving.
We have had
Hotel California, huh?
revert some licenses back to the town, which then they go to the wait list, or, in the instance of somebody passing and there's nobody to inherit it and there is no will, then in that case, it gets reverted. Yeah, I think they did the math on it, and for every 5 transfers, 1 person comes off the wait list. I was thinking of offering that vacant site to the wait list, but in all of the years that I've seen, whenever it does get offered to somebody, they don't take it. But I'd be interested in
Just because of the location?
Because it's just sitting there, you know? It's been sitting there the entire time I've worked here. And if you can take one person off the wait list and give them the 2 acres to start up or not, to fail after 5 years, and then either transfer to whoever, or it goes back to the wait list again, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Run it down the list.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would.
There was a
That'd be
gentleman
cool.
here who's, what, his wife was on the list for 19 years or something? She might be near the top.
Oh, wait, let's not.
No, my wife's been on the list for 13 years. I think she's number 3, or maybe 4. Mine came off the list. I was number 17 at the time, which was before the oyster craze went. So that's why I got mine at 17. I don't think a grant would ever go down that far down the list today. No freaking way.
Yeah.
No way.
All right, I'm going to next agenda this, and I'm going to move to number 4, section 40760, amend the existing regulation by removing the crossed-out wording highlighted in bold and adding the wording highlighted in bold.
Yep.
What is
So
this?
this was the educational requirement for somebody new coming in. You guys were not pleased with my wording from last month, so I went back and adopted the, the KISS model, keep it simple, stupid. And so the only thing we would be requiring for a new licensee is the wording highlighted in bold, which reads, in addition, new licensees are required to provide documentation that the new licensee has taken the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension shellfish farming course or equivalent is approved by the Shellfish Constable. So again, if there's a transfer and you've been working the site for 10 years and we know that you know what you're doing, I would be willing to waive that and have that discretion. But otherwise, if you're brand new, you're a novice, you've never done this before, but you really want to try, then you have 2 years to show me proof that you've taken something to educate yourself in aquaculture.
So let's see if I understand this. They're required to take this shellfishing course for 2 years?
Nope, they're just required to provide documentation that the licensee has taken the shellfish farming course within the first 2 years of annual reports. So already for new licensees, within their first 3 years, we require that they submit their seed slips and like gear purchase slips to show that they're not just sitting on it idly vacant for 3 years. And then you have those other 2 years in the 5-year original license to start making production value or investment value, whatever we decide that looks like. But if you're a complete novice to the industry, in an effort to protect what growers had wanted, to protect the Barnstable brand, you have to, take a course within your first 2 years and just, you get a certificate when you attend it. So if you provide that within your first 2 years of annual reports, along with what's already required for your first 3 years under the original license, then that, I think, would be suitable. Like I keep coming back to, this is public land in public trust, then I don't think that it's fair to the community as a whole to restrict that only to people who have prior experience. There's no reason why somebody who's never cultivated an oyster before can't do it if given the opportunity, if they have the money to start it up, and if they show that they're willing to educate themselves in it.
So, discussion?
Just thought, so if someone were to get a license and then turn around and immediately sell it to someone else?
You can't do that.
Well, or not, sell it's the wrong word, put themselves under the umbrella of another grower, would they have to take this course?
Yeah,
If they weren't physically active, that, another grower was working their land for them or their grant, they would still have to take the course.
yeah.
That's interesting.
I mean, it would be a requirement for a licensee. And I think most new licensees that are novices to it are immediately like, let me have somebody else manage this for me.
Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense.
And if you have experience, you waive that?
Yeah, so so that's kind of, or equivalent is approved by the Shellfish Constable. Like say,
Working on a farm?
say you get a transfer,
Yeah, you're gonna waive me.
I would be willing to waive it for you because you're out there
You asked
already
nicely.
doing it. Yeah,
Thank you.
you would have to ask.
Tyler,
them.
Jack.
Exactly. People
For instance,
who
that
had
been out there, you
transfers
knew.
last year who have been out there. You know, Jack was working under JB
Mm-hmm.
and Tyler was working under Margaret Hill. And so forcing them to take a course when they've already been out there and are already doing this and have
Mm-hmm.
already been through Vibrio seasons compliance, I don't think is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But for people like, I know there was concern over when Deb Hill got her license because she is a complete novice who sat on the list for 20 years before being offered a site. But we continuously, when she interacts with our department, she loves doing it. And she took the course, unrequired, but took it. And so this is just, you know, for those types of situations, kind of putting some sort of investment in education, not just like monetarily and going out and buying seed and like throwing it all over the place.
I do have a kind of a wording question.
Sure.
After your paren, you say within the first 2 years, annual reports.
Yep.
So you don't have to report, do you have to report the first 2 years you're operating?
You have to report every year that you're operating.
So within the first 2 years?
Within the first 2 years, you need to, along with what's required of you already, submit proof that you've taken this course.
Okay?
Or you have to show us some other equivalent that would waive that.
So you get the license, within the first 2 years of having the license, you have to prove that you've taken the course.
Yep.
So why does annual reports have anything to do with that 2 years?
Because it would be documentation that you would submit along with your annual report, which is required every year.
So within the first 2 years, okay. I just don't know why the word annual reports follows years.
I guess just because this is within the filing of annual reports regulation as a whole, it outlines like what people have to do in their first 3 years of having the license, outlines you can't, what you have to provide us for the first 3 years. I could remove annual reports from the sentence and it could just say within the first 2 years of holding the original license.
Right.
Do you want to
If
say that instead?
Well, if that's what we're trying to accomplish, that you get your license year one, so the next 2 years, you have to prove to your department that you've had
Yeah.
or you've taken the course.
Okay.
Or they've applied to you and they've convinced you that there's some other equivalent rather than taking the course.
Okay.
If it's just within those 2 years.
Yeah. So within the first 2 years of holding the original license?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That's easy.
Further discussion? Yes, Chris.
You made me think of this, not to beat a dead horse. So are you saying within 2 years of the anniversary of getting the license? Because the annual report is at the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, this, if I adopt what he's suggesting, it would be within the first 2 years of holding the original license.
Of the anniversary
So
of
of
receiving.
issuance of the license. So
That-
you're
okay.
issued the license on this date, it's good for 5 years initially. Within the first 2 years of holding that license, you would need to provide this.
Because I-
And it would no longer be tied to an annual report.
So that's why I was thinking the annual report is due at the end of the year, and that's why I thought maybe it was the 2 years due at the end of the calendar year, not on the anniversary of the issuance. So you just explained it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, I like your wording better. I will admit, my degree is in marine biology, not like English or wordsmithing. So always appreciate the commentary.
Always happy to help. Anybody else? Discussion? Do we want to vote on this one? So I'll entertain a motion. Somebody's shaking their head, yes. Anybody want to make a motion on this?
How do you do it? I'd like to make a motion to approve number 4, section 407-6C.
As amended by that language. Jake, yes or no?
Yes.
It's been moved. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Discussion within the committee? Public? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Proposal, or number 5, proposal to amend section 407-12.
So this is continued discussion. We started talking about the commercial apprentice program last month, and I said I would come back with some wording. And so this is some of the wording that I came up with. So first of all, I've been wanting to get rid of this piece of this regulation for a while because I just feel like the wording itself is really outdated and offensive. But I'd like to get rid of under classes of permit and conditions, the word that they're issued to persons other than aliens. Because I just think that that's very not okay, and should come out. So I'd like to remove that one little piece of it, because obviously we're gonna issue commercial permits to individuals, and you have to prove domicile, so
Not
you
Martians.
can't. No Martians, yeah. Right. So the second piece of it was looking at, all the way down at the bottom of this very long regulation, is changing around the apprentice commercial shellfishing permit. So we had talked about keeping all of the hours with just a wild harvester and not an aquaculturist. We had talked about some age changes or, adaptations, getting rid of the part of it that speaks to them having to wait until their 18th birthday for that permit to expire if they've completed the work ahead of time. So it's messy, but as a whole, would read apprentice commercial shellfishing permit. The town manager or shellfish constable may issue an apprentice commercial shellfishing permit to a resident child who is sponsored by a town of Barnstable commercial shellfishing permit holder or town of Barnstable commercial shellfish permit holders. So we didn't want to restrict it to just one person being a sponsor if getting the 400 hours was going to be hard and if more than one person was willing to sponsor. Said child must be under the age of 18 rather than 16, I believe is what it currently says. The apprentice shall assist only the sponsor or sponsors and only in the harvest of the sponsor's catch limit or limits if you're working with more than one. The apprentice shall not harvest shellfish without the accompaniment of a sponsor. Upon completion and documentation to the satisfaction of the shellfish constable of 400 hours of having worked under the tutelage of the sponsor or sponsors, and documentation of successful completion of a Coast Guard boater safety course, the apprentice commercial shellfishing permit holder may apply for a town of Barnstable commercial shellfishing permit pursuant to these rules and regulations. These allowances to an apprentice permitted under the regulations are distinct and separate from the stipulations that apply to new applicants under subsection A2 above, which speaks to the closed fishery. After 5 years of holding a town of Barnstable commercial shellfish permit, as a result of having completed the apprenticeship, the commercial permit shall be added to the closed commercial fishery and subject to subsection A2 above. So the concern was that, like, this is really great, but if it catches on to everybody and a whole bunch of, 14 to 17-year-olds decide to get in on this, but then go through the apprentice program and don't actually commit to it, or after 1 year of paying $550, decide, oh, man, I really don't want to do this, there's a vacancy in the fishery. So we wanted to, similar to the original license issued to an aquaculturist, have them show that investment in being a commercial permit holder before adding that number to the closed list.
Gotcha, good idea.
Could we just?
Not mine, Paul's.
Could we just?
Paul Hamlin's.
If you get it through the apprenticeship, just, and they give up their license even 20 years down the road, just, it doesn't go to the lottery? Because then that, am I reading this as it would increase the fishery eventually over time?
If that person were to do the 400 hours as a child, right, go through the apprentice program and then hold a commercial permit for 5 years, then on year 6, we would go from, say, the 47-person fishery that we are now to 48. If they bail at any point in time, during those 5 years, it stays a 47-person fishery.
But there's no way to, I guess you're just gonna increase the fishery. I mean, I'm not thinking there's gonna be a lot of people doing it, but you will, like over time. And then if there's like some sort of boom or something, then there's just more gravy diggers out there, basically.
I don't think we're ever going to be in a position that we were when we were like a 200-person fishery and everybody was like pillaging Barnstable.
No, but if everybody's kids now get licenses, because it's very easy to do or whatever,
It's not necessarily easy for an 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old, if they're not actively fishing and invested in it, to put up that money every year to renew. So I don't want to add a person through the apprenticeship as a permanent to the fishery unless they're actually invested in it.
No, yeah, I'm just saying, if that person was to give it up, it wouldn't go back to the lottery.
Like in general?
Yeah, just in general. Like
So-
a special license that you got through an apprenticeship.
So then that's changing the intent of the regulation when it was created, which I was not around for, so
Okay.
I won't speak.
Is there
To
a
that
minimum
part.
catch for commercial fishermen?
There are no quotas, no.
Why not?
Well, if there were quotas, then at least half the fishery would go to the lottery at this point. This is just like, I would say at least half the people just sit on the permits every year and renew, because it is a privilege that they can use. But if somebody doesn't want to use that permit in any given year, I don't see why there should be a quota for that. It's something to fall back
Like
on.
an aquaculture grant?
Well, that's different.
What's different about it?
Well, you're actively taking out of public reach land that would otherwise be accessible to them.
They're
A
actively-
wild harvester can
They're
only
actively
harvest where
taking
wild
out
harvesters
wild
can.
shellfish from the public.
Yeah, but they have, like, it's open to everybody. Where you farm is not open to everybody.
Well, it's because we put it in and we take it out. We don't just take it out.
Yeah. So I see those as two separate
I
things.
don't see them any different.
Yes.
Yeah, there's nothing like firsthand experience. However, not everybody out there is qualified to instruct. And I think there should be a link to 407-60, which is the one we just discussed about getting a permit and taking a test or studying the course. Because I think that, you're looking for, want to have a well-rounded individuals who are coming up. And I think that they would know more when they're on the site of the questions they should be asking from working through documentation at home that offers them education, as well as working out there with the people who are obviously well-versed in their industry and successful. So the added value to anybody who is entering in as an apprentice, I think it should include a link to this page that they have to take the course.
But there is no course to learn how to be a wild harvester.
Oh, sorry.
This is not, we're not talking about aquaculturists. We're
I
talking
missed that.
about commercial permit holders, like wild harvesters.
My apologies.
Yeah.
400 hours, we
If you can't figure
discussed
out
it.
how to dig a steamer in 400 hours.
Now, is there any cost to get the apprenticeship? The only cost is when you get issued the license.
That was a yes.
Yeah, it's just when you apply for the license.
Yep.
Yeah.
Apprenticeship license, or it's not called that. It's just the right to,
The permit to be an apprentice, yeah.
right, and there's no cost.
Nope.
Okay.
Until you
There
issue
never
the
has
license.
been, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other change is to add the word senior
Yeah, because that's what it's listed as,
in the statute.
in our, in our permits. So it was just kind of making the regulations fit with what our permits are actually labeled as, which is either a master permit or a master senior permit. And then just adding the word aquaculture, so you see expressly that this does not apply to aquaculture license holders while on their licensed site.
Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
How do they prove the 400 hours?
So that we left intentionally vague. It's just you need to prove
To
to
you.
the satisfaction of the Shellfish Constable that you have done this. Because we kind of went down a rabbit hole last month that I don't really feel like needs to be gone down. If you have a sponsor or sponsors and they're willing to do the work and document like the days and the hours that they took you out and what they took you out to learn, and you can provide that to me at the end of your 400 hours along with your, boater safety course completion, I think that that is suitable documentation. Some people may decide to take that further than a very sort of basic requirement, but I think really putting like a syllabus to it just doesn't really make much sense to
I'm
me.
not thinking a syllabus, I'm just thinking guidance, because 400 hours is a lot of time, it's gonna happen over several years. And if I were to come to you and say, this is what I did, and you looked at it, you're like, that's not it, how do you go back and reinvent it? So there was some guidance going into it as to what you were looking for?
I
Like,
would-
it's just keep a diary or something, or, like you do when you drive.
Yeah.
And you have to have 25 hours with your parents, and it's like,
I think that would be a very sort of simple and open conversation with the parent of the child and the sponsors along with the child and say, okay, what are you going to do to show me that this homework has been done,
so someone
basically?
comes to you and registers for this at the very beginning? Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's when you have that,
Discussion.
right.
Yeah. It's kind of like, this is the groundwork. Like, how are you going to prove that this is getting done over
Gotcha.
the course of time that you're completing it? I don't think it needs to be like in the regulation necessarily.
Okay.
But yeah, nobody can just apply for that without it being vetted either through the town manager or me, and it's more likely going to be the Shellfish Constable.
I just got one more thing. I have a tribal ID. I'd like to get an apprentice. It doesn't say that in the regulation. Will that still work, or would it have to state that? I don't have a commercial, but I commercial shellfish.
So,
So would it have to state
Your-
a tribal ID? The rule
I mean,
for me to get an apprentice?
because you have Aboriginal rights to wild harvest. So
Exactly,
you're a wild harvester outside of these regulations. So if you wanted to sponsor somebody, I would say that you could.
Just want to make sure before it's
We-
finalized.
yeah.
If you have to put it in there.
We had
Yeah.
discussed over a number of years, like putting stuff in here to address tribal rights, but it gets very wordy and very complex very quickly. But the take home is that you as a tribal member have rights to that fishery, whether recreationally or commercially. And you have a transaction card with the state as a wild harvester, even though you don't hold a town of Barnstable commercial shellfishing permit, but you are a wild harvester. And I would say if you had decided that you wanted to sponsor somebody, your tribal card should be more than enough to facilitate that.
Further discussion? Pat?
Wouldn't you have insurance anyway when you're out there for various reasons? And wouldn't you track some of the hours for that anyway? Because of insurance?
I don't know the answer to that. Amy? Or anybody?
I'm confused at the
Personal
question.
insurance, body harm, workers, people working for you?
I think it would just depend on if they were an employee of yours or a subcontractor.
Yeah,
And if they're a subcontractor,
no. No,
definitely not.
For themselves, but if it's an employee, that's.
You're talking about a shell.
Are you talking about workers' comp
Hook
insurance?
yourself for that rate,
I was
you're in trouble.
wondering
You're going to the
about,
hospital, that's a
you
problem.
have like, an apprentice, you would cover them under some form of.
It totally
liability or
depends on how
anything?
you have them as an employee,
Yeah.
whether they're a subcontractor or you're W-2ing them.
Again,
Just curious.
is this speaking to aquaculture again?
No, wild harvesting apprentice.
So
Apprentice.
I would say that that's a discussion for the sponsor to have with whoever they are choosing to sponsor. Because that's a personal issue. That's not for the town to require or determine.
Sounds business.
What's our pleasure? Do we want to vote on this? Do you want to take this back to legal? what do we want to do here?
I had just brought it for continued discussion, but if you guys are okay with the wordings as submitted today, I wouldn't mind a vote on it, because then I can give it to legal and say, does this pass your muster? And if they say, yay, that's great, then we can log it under the things that you guys have approved over the past year and a half that have yet to go to public hearing. And if not, I can bring back the wording and we can revote based on what legal suggestions were.
Okay.
Could I just ask about the, like, the adding it to the 47 licenses, and you said the intent, like, what was the initial intent? It says to add it to the,
The initial intent was to add younger people to the shell fishery, to the overall wild shell fishery.
okay.
That was the intent. Because it is a closed shell fishery.
Yeah, no, because, like, I know it was reduced by, like, what, 3 out, 1 in for a while to the no. Well,
Until around like 2001 or 2003. I had the timeline for you guys, what, like 2 years ago? Yeah, so it was, one could only come in if 3 went out. And then over time, it sort of landed at like, now only 1 person is leaving and 1 person can come in, and then they established a lottery because people were like fighting each other. And then I think probably at that point was when, if we were to add new people to the fishery, to a closed fishery, based on what you're saying, the preference was that it would be younger people.
We were concerned for the age of the wild harvesters.
Is there a number of fishermen that you would, like, feel uncomfortable with? Not saying that it would ever get out of hand, you know, I know this is pretty hard to accomplish, but if you are adding every time over years, would it get to 100 licenses?
I don't think, I mean, in the
Like-
time that I've worked here, and to my knowledge, after being educated by Paul Hamlin, only 2 people have gone through the apprentice program.
Yeah.
Him and Jacob Burnham.
Well, we're increasing it to 18, which will make it more enticing to, like, the 16 to 18-year-olds.
But it's also not like we're taking out a billboard ad for it. So somebody would already have to have that interest, or have like somebody in their family being like, hey, is this of interest to you because you're outdoorsy and you like, you know, shellfishing and whatever. And then at that point, it would be at least 5 years after all of these requirements before, so you're looking at, you know, at least like 6 or 7 years before even 1 number would be added to the
Alright.
closed fishery.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Discussion? What's our preference? Next agenda?
We can vote on it.
Anybody else want to opine on this? Shaking of the head, Paul.
I don't want to opine. I think I'm ready. We're ready. I'd like to make a motion, we accept 407-12
A second
as
that.
is.
Okay. Discussion, further discussion on the motion? Committee, public? Great. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, it's approved. And I think we've already gone through, oh, no, status of Scudder Lane. Ditto?
Are we doing that again?
I will refer to whatever comments I made last month, as they are the same as this month.
Thank you. And then continued discussion, possible changes to 407-12?
That is what we just went through right here. I had it on the same document for everyone to review, so I didn't have to have it on more than one, but that's this regulation you guys
Right.
just voted on.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I'll make that motion.
Wait, wait.
Motion to adjourn.
What do you got? You got? I'm sorry? Step to the microphone, please. Tell us who you are again.
Again, Mark Begley from West Barnstable. I just wanted to say thank you to Amy for the work that she did on this. This was a lot of work, especially for, you know, our new liaison to be aware. This is a lot of contentious issues have been raised over the last year or so, and a lot of good work went into this. I just hope she got enough feedback to help figure out what to do with 57 on here based on what was brought up. But I think there's been a lot of good work that has been done.
Thank you, Mark.
To that, Chair. My plan is to work on that like ASAP. I know I can't submit anything en masse to the Shellfish Committee members themselves outside of committee meetings because it can be seen as you guys being able to converse about something outside of it could be a violation of open meeting law. But as soon as I have something for review, I can send it to the growers for comment and feedback. So that way it's more of what the chair was looking for in terms of your involvement with wording prior to the next meeting.
Okey-doke.
Thank you.
And do you have a motion, Candy?
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, it's seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.